Good day everyone, good day listeners. This is Irish Perio from BSC 1-4, presenting to you the topic assigned to me, the psychodynamic theory and psychosexual stages of human development, and also the behavioral theory. At the end of this presentation, I hope you learn about the topics that I'm going to discuss here. Without any commercial, let's start this. So the next slide is one of the topic that we will be discussing. In this video, there are three topics that we will be discussing. First, the psychodynamic theory. Second, the psychosexual stages of human development. And third, the behavioral theory. But before we proceed, let's all find out who's the man behind this theory. Sigmund Freud was an Australian neurologist who is perhaps most known as the founder of psychoanalysis. Freud developed a set of therapeutic techniques centered on talk therapy that involve the use of strategies such as transference, free association, and dream interpretation. Regardless of the perception of Sigmund Freud's theory, there is no question that he had an enormous impact on the field of psychology. His work supported the belief that not all mental illnesses have psychological causes, and he also recognized that cultural differences have an impact on psychology and behavior. When most people think that psychology, they think of someone sitting on a couch talking about their childhood. This comes from Freud's theory. So let's see who Freud is. In this statement, it is under the psychodynamic theory. Sigmund Freud believes that human behavior could be explained by intraphysic processes and interpersonal patterns. When we say psychodynamic theory, it is a forces outside of a person's awareness. Next slide. In this slide, you can see the topographical model of the mind, which is the unconscious mind. There are three types of consciousness. First is the subconsciousness. When we say the subconsciousness, it is about the small amount of mental activity that we know about. Originating in the work of Sigmund Freud, the psychodynamic perspective emphasizes unconscious psychological processes. For example, wishes and fears of which we're not fully aware, and contents that childhood experience are crucial shaping adult personality. Freud is the best known and the most controversial psychologist. Why? Because of his theory of psychosexual development and the Oedipus complex. His theories also revolutionized the field of psychology in the late 18,000s and are still used today. Next slide. In this slide, you can see the picture about the defense mechanism. There are 6 types of defense mechanism. First is repression. It is an unconscious mechanism employed by the ego to keep disturbing or threatening thoughts from becoming unconscious. Second is the denial. It involves blocking external events from awareness. Example of this: if some situation is just too much to handle, the person could refuse to experience it. The next one is projection. It involves individuals attributing their own unacceptable thoughts, feelings, and even motives to another person. Psycho- Next, displacement is a satisfying impulse with a substitute object. The next one, regression, is a movement back in psychological time when one is faced by stress. And the next, sublimation, is a satisfying an impulse with a substitute object in some socially acceptable ways. So in the previous slide, we recognized who is the person in the theories we are going to tackle. In this slide, we are going to start on our own topic. Let's move to the next topic. Psychodynamic theory. The theory of psychodynamic was created to explain what Freud saw during psychoanalysis. There are three parts to the psychodynamic model: the ID, superego, and ego. When we say the ID develops first in the human mind. It can only want think of screaming baby that only knows that it wants something. The ID also strives to satisfy our basic instinct. Often these are related to sexual and aggressive drives. The next one is the superego. As we grow up, we begin to absorb the ideals, norms, and morality of society around us. This sets up a conflict with the I. Superego is the part of personality that internalize ideals and provides standards for judgment. While the ID can only want the superego wants to do what is right. The next one is the ego. The ego is the executive part of personality. It meditates the demands of the ID and superego, trying to achieve a compromise between them. A psychologically healthy person must have a balanced ego. Giving in the ID or superego all the time can cause psychological problems. In the next page, psychodynamic theory, which is centered on the notion that an individual's early childhood experience influences his or her likelihood for committing future crimes. They are constantly drawn to past events that occurred in their early childhood. And because of the negligent, unhappy, and miserable childhood, which is more often characterized by a lack of love or nurturing, a criminal offender has a weak or an absent ego. Most important, research suggests that having a weak ego is linked with a poor or absent or social etiquette, immaturity, and dependence on others. Research further suggests that individuals with weak egos may be more likely to engage in a drug abuse. There are also five psychosexual stages: the oral, anal, phallic, latency, and genital. So that is psychodynamic is. Let's proceed to our next slide, the psychosexual stages of human development. As you can see on the slide, Sigmund Freud categorized psychosexual stages of human development into five: the oral, the anal, and the phallic, the latent, and the genital. Freud believed that personality developed through a series of childhood stages in which the pleasure-seeking energies of the ID become focused on a certain erogenous areas. An erogenous areas zone is characterized as an area of the body that is particularly sensitive to stimulation. During the five psychosexual stages, which are the oral, anal, phallic, latent, and genital stages, the erogenous zone associated with each stage serve as a source of pleasure. Oral stage. Age range since birth 1 year. During the oral stage, the infant's primary source of interaction occurs through the mouth. So the routine of sucking reflex is especially important. The primary conflict at this stage is the weaning process of the child must become less dependent upon caretakers. Second one is the anal stage. Age range from 1 to 3 years old. During the anal stage, Freud believed that the primary focus of the libido was on controlling bladder and bowel movements. Freud also believed that positive experience during the toilet training stage serve as the basis for people to become competent, productive, creative adults. Third is phallic, stage that ranges from 3 to 6 years old. Freud suggested that during the phallic stage, the primary focus of the libido is on the genitals. Eventually, the child begins to identify with the same-sex parents as a means of vicariously processing the other parents. For girls, however, Freud believes that penis envy was never fully resolved and that all women remain somewhat fixated on this stage. The fourth is the latent stage. It ranges from 6 to puberty. During this stage, the superego continues to develop while the ID's energy are suppressed. Children develop social skills, values, and relationship with peers and adults outside the family. The latent period is a time of exploration in which the sexual energy repressed or dormant. This stage is important in the development of social and communication skills and self-confidence. Lastly, the genital. During the final stage of psychosexual development, the individual develops a strong sexual interest in the opposite sex. This stage begins during puberty but lasts throughout the rest of a person's life. If the other stages have been fully completed, the individual should be well balanced, warm, and caring. The next page. So, that is the psychosexual stages of human development. Let's move forward to our last topic, the behavioral theory. What is behaviorism? Behaviorism is an attempt to make psychology more scientific by studying only external behavior. Behavior means response of an organism to stimuli, objective and observable. The study of how environmental stimuli bring about changes in people's behavior. Behaviorists ignore what goes in the inside of our mind since it can be seen or measured. History of behaviorism. A very popular in US before and writings were translated brought here. Behaviorism beat up out John theories to become the dominant theory in US. US schools were structured after behaviorism rather than Dewey's model. Americans very interested in the scientific way to parent and educate. Sigmund Freud also emphasized the importance of the unconscious mind, and a primary assumption of Freudian theory is that the unconscious mind governs the behavior to a greater degree than a people suspect. Indeed, the goal of a psychoanalysis is to make the unconscious conscious. And this is the end of our discussion. Hope you learn from me and enjoy my presentation. Again, I am Perio Irish Eye from BSC 1-4, leaving you the face, let your dreams be your wings. Thank you and God bless always. Pagdayon future public servants.